What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the White Boots Podcast. My name is Leo. This is a show where we talk to people who are or have been in the military, and I get a chance to hear the military story. But today is going to be a solo episode. It's late February. A lot of things have been going on in the world, most notably what happened in Mexico on February 22nd, 2026, with the fall of the head of the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación in Mexico. I've been following Mexican politics for a little while now. I thought I'd write a good hefty piece on a cause, effect, and way forward for Mexico. And I know what you're thinking, this is just all speculation. This is not all speculation. I have cited my sources, and I will cite my sources in the description or in the comments or something like that, so that way you can get a chance to go in and verify yourself. I'll also try to put like a timestamp of where my sources are or something like that, but I'll try to do the best I can. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the cause and effect, way forward for Mexico. On February 22nd, 2026, Mexican armed forces conducted a military operation in Tapalpa to capture the leader of the fastest growing criminal organization, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho. El Mencho led Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, in Mexico for just under 20 years. Following the capture, the cartel quickly responded by causing absolute chaos in approximately 13 states across Mexico. At first, roadblocks were established by stealing civilian vehicles, setting them on fire. Then after that, it quickly shifted into destroying commercial locations. Costco's, gas stations, and convenience stores were looted and set on fire, covering the sky in a cloud of smoke. In several states, bancos de bienestar, or well-being banks, were set ablaze. These banks are state-owned, state-run Mexican development banks established in 2019. They focus on social program delivery and financial inclusion. Additionally, these banks are speculated to be the places where corrupt officials stash their money to facilitate laundering, allegedly. The cartel was making sure the government knew that there would be consequences. By the evening, it was reported that around 73 people have died and around 25 of those were Mexican military personnel. But what does this all really mean? Sure, cartel leader's dead. Won't just another one pop up? Hasn't Mexico really kind of always been corrupt? So if so, why now, right? To what extent did the U.S. military play a role in this operation? I'm going to attempt to answer all these questions and more as we attempt to pull back the curtain on current Mexican politicians and their links to organized crime. But before we dive into those, we need to really understand where this war on drugs started and how we ended up with such turmoil. In order to understand the basic root of the aggressiveness of all this, we quickly need to travel to early 2000s. For decades, the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, PRI, ruled over Mexico uninterrupted until Vicente Fox from the PAN party was elected into power. It's really important to note here that the PRI had maintained political control over criminal organizations during their rule, but that balance was pretty much shattered once Vicente Fox became the president. During this time, new cartels popped up, Los Zetas, La Familia Michoacana, while the Cartel de Sinaloa, which was led by the one and only Chapo Guzman, remained the most powerful. Towards the end of Fox's administration, two candidates were campaigning for the presidency, Felipe Calderón and Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who we're going to call AMLO. He will be important later. Calderón described AMLO as a danger to Mexico. AMLO lost to Calderón by just 0.56% of the vote. After demanding a recount which upheld the decision, AMLO made the bold move by holding a massive public ceremony in the Zócalo, declaring himself the legitimate president. Why the fuck do we care about what happened a long time ago? I'm going to get to it. This is where kind of like the aggression towards cartels really starts. As president, Felipe Calderón launched an aggressive military offense against cartels with the support of the Mérida Initiative, in which the U.S. provided $1.9 million. A quick Google search will show you that the Mérida Initiative, also called Plan México, was a security cooperation agreement among the United States, government of Mexico, and the countries of Central America. And that program ran from 2007 to about 2021. This initiative, along with the balance between government and cartels being shattered, drastically increased violence in Mexico. Murders, kidnappings, extortion, and everything in between were at an all-time high. During a press conference in 2011, Calderón stated, quote, and I'm translating here, "Criminal organizations were taking control of Mexican states, and people think that the government shouldn't get involved, and the perception that the government generates this violence. The violence comes from those whom with weapons seek to dominate and impose their law. The law is not that of El Chapo, Los Zetas, nor El Golfo. Here we Mexicans give ourselves the law. Maybe another president will come by and maybe they'll do exactly what you, the press, want. Sit quietly, turn the other way, but to think that that will end violence is ingenuine. This is exactly what would happen 6 years after his presidency. This is where we fast forward a little bit closer to present times. In 2018, when AMLO, he would become the new president of Mexico. AMLO ran for president in 2006, losing to Calderon, and against Peña Nieto, which he lost again. Frustrated with his loss, he ended up founding a new party, Movimiento Regeneración Nacional, or Morena. And in 2018, luck finally struck when he became president of Mexico. His campaign centered on helping the poor, the elderly, bridging the country's wealth gap, and combating drug trafficking with his slogan, Abrazos, no balazos, or hugs, not gunshots. Kind of weird, right? He was widely perceived as more real, democratic, and closer to the people. He took the bus, stopped at random convenience shops to get his own food, and speaks vernacular Spanish. At state banquets, he offered rural Mexican dishes like tamales, and he conducted daily news conferences in which he repeatedly emphasizes the viciousness of Mexico's economic elites. For decades, he had visited little communities that were previously uninteresting to federal officials. People in those communities remember him as one of the few genuine encounters with the Mexican state. So he got elected as president mainly because he was running off of the illusion that he was one of the people, right? Like I said, he spoke vernacular Spanish. He took the bus, which a fucking presidential candidate, you'll never see a presidential candidate in the U.S. taking a fucking bus. You might, but I mean, it's not often, right? So and I remember him stating that he's like, I'm just one of the people. I come from a poor background. And I remember him specifically saying, I only have 200 pesos to my name. I only have 200 pesos in my bank account. So he's really fucking leaning in. And this is where we kind of see a little bit more of the civil affairs and psyops kind of working in his favor. While formal ties from him to the cartel are sparse, there's heavy speculation about his ties to organized crime. USDA agents uncovered what they believe was substantial evidence that major cocaine traffickers had funneled some $2 million to his first presidential campaign. Mexican and U.S. authorities scrutinized retired Army Colonel Silvio Hernandez Soto, who served as a senior bodyguard to AMLO during his 2006 presidential campaign, over alleged links to organized crime. According to a DEA informant who had previously trafficked drugs for the cartel leader known as La Barbie, Hernandez was introduced during the campaign period and was later approached to help arrange military protection for drug flights passing through Cancun Airport. So now, not only are we involving presidential candidates, but we're also involving a retired Mexican Army colonel recruited by the cartels in order to facilitate protection, military protection for cartels landing in Cancun. So now we're getting the military involved, right? So this is where it all kind of starts to come together, right? In 2012, Hernandez was arrested in Mexico alongside several army generals accused of assisting a corruption and protection scheme tied to drug trafficking. However, the investigation was halted in 2013 when a new Mexican administration dropped the charges and released all suspects. The accusations were never fully proven or formally resolved. Hernandez later returned to public service, holding a senior police role in Sinaloa, a region closely associated with organized crime. After López Obrador, AMLO, assumed the presidency in 2018, Hernandez was nominated for a high-level position in the Attorney General's office. Internal government documents later indicated that Mexico's defense minister sought to block the appointment, reflecting concerns with parts of the security establishment. The internal disagreement did not become public at the time. So if you got kind of lost here, after all the charges were dropped in 2013 and fast forward to 2018, Hernandez came back to public service, the retired Army colonel who was recruited by the cartels to facilitate drug trafficking operations by giving or assisting with Mexican military personnel for drug drops in Cancun. That guy came back, held a senior role in Sinaloa, and he was fine. AMLO put him in a role, and he's like, hey, man, fucking got it. And so the Mexico's defense minister was like, I don't think that's good, man. Like, I don't think we should be fucking doing this. Nothing came from that. Nothing fucking came from that, right? But this is not the only instance of wrongdoing by AMLO or his inner circle. Manuel Bartlett, head of the electricity sector, failed to report nearly 24 luxury homes he owns in Mexico City worth over $40 million. Just forgot to report it. Senator Napoleon El Napito Gomez Urrutia, a former labor leader, now travels by private jet while his son posts YouTube videos of his Mercedes, Porsches, Land Rovers, and other luxury cars. I'm just saying. And despite his son's lack of professional experience, despite that guy's son's lack of professional experience, he's jumping into the mining and energy business, economic sectors that his father oversees. The head of López Obrador's political party claims to have made an accounting error when filing her 2013 taxes, one that saved her over $850,000, which is wild that she's just like, my bad, I made a mistake. That'd be like me doing my own taxes and being like, dude, I'm getting like $4 million back. I'll see y'all in prison. During his last months in power, he pushed a judicial overhaul that removed judges and required them to be elected by popular vote. Additionally, there was a supervisory body that would discipline judges that AMLO suspected to be corrupt. These and other judicial reforms were the breeding grounds to assure that his party stayed in power, or as one journalist put it, they are destroying the ladder that they used to climb into power. So they're making sure, this is widely speculated, that AMLO, during his last months, made sure that he would make it all nearly impossible for other parties to get into power, and he made sure that he put judicial reforms in place in order to make sure that his party stayed where they're at, despite if he's running the show or not. Here we start to see a pattern of mistrust and corruption with AMLO, despite his initial perception, but it continues with his successor, the first female president, Claudia Sheinbaum. Several outlets saw Sheinbaum as a reflection of AMLO because of similar rhetoric, communication style, alignment on major policies like social programs, energy, nationalism, judicial reform, and loyalty to the political movement known as the Fourth Transformation, or 4T. Many speculate that while AMLO is not the president of Mexico anymore, he's still pulling the strings through Sheinbaum, assuring her compliance with criminal organizations, which is a wild accusation, but there's still speculation amongst critics, journalists. Even though Manuel López Obrador is not the president, he's still kind of pulling the strings through Sheinbaum. Now that we kind of understand where all this came from, let's get into the real meat and potatoes, right? Hasn't Mexico always really been corrupt? Probably. But why now? Why now, right? So there's been building tension between U.S. President Donald Trump and the Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Tensions which started rising during early 2025, but took a turn through 2025. One example is when Mexico, via Pemex, which is Mexico's largest fuel supply company, when Pemex was a primary fuel source for Cuba, sending roughly $496 million worth of oil. Another tension point was in August 2025 when Mexico agreed to hand over 26 top cartel leaders to the U.S., including the leader of a major drug cartel and another kingpin accused of killing an LA sheriff deputy. In return, Trump agreed to delay tariffs on Mexico for 90 days. In a December 2025 press conference, when asked about cartel activity escalating, Sheinbaum stated that going back to war with the cartels was, quote, not an option. Firstly, because it is outside of the framework of the law, because it gives a permission to kill without jurisdiction. This statement left many citizens feeling abandoned, as the sentiment was, what about us? I remember watching that, and I remember listening to that. I remember being like, that's fucking wild that you're saying that that we can't go after the cartels. And I'm sure right now that video is making its rounds through the social medias, right? But it was wild for me to sit there, listen to this press conference, and her say, we can't go after these cartels because they're outside of the scope of the law. And going outside of the scope of the law we're not doing that. We can't do that because it just gives a permission to kill. What the fuck are they doing, right? And that's where most of the sentiment of the rest of the country was like, dude, what the fuck is? Well, what about us? Like, I thought you were trying to help us, right? Anyways, January 2026 was packed with signs that something was big was going to happen. Shortly after the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Trump called into Fox and Friends for a 30-minute interview and was asked if the operation was meant as a message to Claudia Sheinbaum, to which he stated, "She's not running Mexico. The cartels are running Mexico." And we could be politically correct and be nice and say, "Oh, yes, she is." No, no, no. She's very frightened of the cartels. They're running Mexico. And I've asked her numerous times, "Would you like us to take out the cartels?" And she says, "No, no, Mr. President, no, no, please." But they come in through the southern border mostly. And he said, something's going to have to be done with Mexico. Trump claimed that he had repeatedly offered U.S. assistance in taking action against drug cartels operating in Mexico. Sheinbaum addressed this during her morning press conferences and stated that she would be open to conversations on planning, but that any action would have to have Mexican military at the forefront and not be U.S. led. The general belief here with the handing over the 26 cartel members and Sheinbaum rejecting U.S. assistance to combat organized crime was the pivot point that led to the capture of El Mencho. In a 2019 press conference, AMLO declared, "This is going to make a little bit of sense. I know we're fast forwarding and then we're traveling back, but this is going to make this is going to just add in a little sprinkle of trust here. Just trust me where I'm going with this." In a 2019 press conference, AMLO declared, quote, and I'm translating here, right? "All the lucrative deals made in the country, corrupt deals, have the approval of the president of the republic. I swear to God, he fucking said that." To which his advisors quickly turned away in disbelief that he admitted something so brazen. If we take this statement and apply it to his successor, who had his full support, she is also aware of the cartel's whereabouts. So if he's saying all the juicy deals, all the lucrative deals that are being made in the country, all the corrupt deals, everything have the oversight of the president, if we take that logic and apply it to his successor now, she knows what the fuck is going on. At this point, the overall view of the Morena Party is that the corruption has such a deep hold in the government that this is not a government disguised as a cartel anymore. It's cartels disguised as governments. The 26 cartel members were extradited by Mexico amid pressure from Trump and his tariff threat. Upon seeing that Mexico did crack, the administration decided to add more pressure and decided that the cartel members were not big enough and launched this operation to capture the head of the organization. On the day of action, February 22nd, 2026, the Secretariat of National Defense released an official statement regarding this military operation. In it, they specified, "It should be mentioned that for the execution of this operation, in addition to the central military intelligence work within the framework of bilateral coordination and cooperation with the USA, complementary information was obtained from authorities of that country." So here in this official statement, they're basically saying, like, yeah, we did this. Like, the government of Mexico did this. The U.S. might have helped, but they just fed, and the official statement was that they fed us information, and through that information we were able to conduct this operation smoothly, right? It was revealed during a press conference on 23 February, the day after the operation, that officially Mexico has been planning this operation since October 2025, with intelligence being fed from the U.S. Believing that Morena's sentiments towards the cartels would change so drastically and initiate the planning that would capture an elite drug lord is a very hard pill to swallow, at least for me. Not because of their lack of capabilities, but from lack of desire. Because if the network gets exposed, it puts everyone at risk. The U.S. may have fed Mexico intelligence on El Mencho's whereabouts. However, they could have had a bigger role in this. Stay with me here. From guiding the Mexican government to possibly being active participants in the operation. This military operation showed who Claudia Sheinbaum is actually loyal to. Not Andrés Manuel López Obrador, but Donald Trump. She tried to push back on his assistance to fight the cartels until the pressure just wouldn't allow it. To me, it's going to be interesting to see what the political sentiment of the Morena Party is and the shift, and if the compliance with the U.S. caused a rift between AMLO and Sheinbaum. Now, you can't have a major event like this without a few conspiracy theories, One theory is that the U.S. spearheaded all of this and let Mexico take full credit. This comes from Pedro Ferriz, a longtime Mexican journalist who claims that reports were sent to him from the Associated Press and Reuters suggest North American forces eliminated El Mencho. He states that CJNG took control of the Guadalajara airport, though the airport officially denies this takeover, causing chaos and taking North American tourists hostage, and summarizes the increased cartel violence throughout all Mexico during his interview, right? Towards the end of his video, he specified this speaks to a clear incursion of North American forces in Mexican territory attacking these fronts. That was just a video that he put out on what he thinks happened and why he thinks North American forces were present, were actually the ones pulling the trigger behind this, right? During the next morning's press conference, Secretary General of the National Defense, Ricardo Trevilla Trejo, acknowledged an exchange of information with NORCOM and restated that planning and execution was done by Mexican Special Forces and the Mexican National Guard. He shares full details of how the operation was actually conducted. He gave insight regarding the means of capture, which involved the surveillance of someone with emotional significance to the target. So pretty much what he's saying here is that they found his lover, they surveilled his lover for a couple months, and then they figured out that El Mencho was eventually going to visit her. So that's pretty much where they caught him. He did fight back tears during his recounting of events during the press conference. However, it is widely speculated that he was tearing up because of the likely death of his boss, after a photo taken in 2018 started circulating online showing him with El Inge, a presumed leader of the CJNG. One thing to note here during the Secretary General's recounting of the events was that when the dust settled and they had positive control of the target, a medevac was requested for El Mencho, his two bodyguards, and the injured officer during the raid. During their time in the air, a decision was made to divert the aircraft because the original location was too hot. They headed to the Morelia International Airport where Acosta was waiting for them. They arrived, the transfer of body is made, and the aircraft makes its way to Mexico City. The official statement is that he died during transportation, though it would make sense that it was around this moment when they realized El Mencho was dead. This diversion gives way. This diversion here, this whole the landing zone, the drop zone was too hot. Couldn't exchange there. This diversion gives way to a theory that has yet to circle the media. It also comes from Pedro Ferriz, who introduced this theory during an interview with Atypical TV. He addresses the discrepancies during the transfer of El Mencho from one aircraft to another and claims he received a call from someone that was in the aircraft. He did not disclose his source, fearing their exposure. This source alleges that 5 FBI agents were on board the receiving aircraft and that one of the FBI agents strangled El Mencho while the others held back the Mexican National Guard. This is an insane accusation to make. I'm just saying, this is insane. Now, this is where we get to a few more outlandish stories, or a few more outlandish theories that are just kind of fun to mention. One of them is that the president was never told about this operation to capture El Mencho, and this comes from also Atypical TV, and in it they mentioned that one of the theories that the president was never told because she was doing something, I forgot what she was doing, and that on her way out, there's a bunch of reporters rushing her, asking her about this, asking her about the operation that just happened. She's like, "Hey, the Secretary of the National Defense is going to address that. I'm not going to address that." And so they're like, "Fine, all right, cool, got it." So that's one of the theories that gives away, right? The president was never told about this, but this one is really kind of it's not hard to think, it's not hard to conceive that he was never really captured, but officials say they matched the DNA to him, right? However, this is just me. There have only been a handful of photos of him, and the one that's circulating the rounds is very old. I think it's from the 90s. If they only have a handful of pictures of him, how the hell did they get a DNA sample of him, right? And obviously, there was another rumor that he was very sick. He had some sort of disease, and he was visiting a doctor's office every so often. That's probably how they got the body, the sample, the DNA to match the DNA that was on the body. I don't know. That one's the fact that they don't have many pictures of him, and the fact that they were like, we don't have a lot of pictures of him, but we have a DNA sample that matches the body. I don't understand how they can have a DNA sample before, but to match the one that they have now. That's just me, right? There's also another theory, which is this one's a little bit more outlandish, but there's another theory that says that this whole operation was to get his laptop, which contained a client list. Now, because there was a couple Instagram posts, and that's why I'm putting this in the list of outlandish theories, right? That are fun to mention, is because this Instagram post is from Do Not Comply and Two Others. Picture credit, Truth Seeker Babe. The supplier is dead, and it reads, the supplier is dead. The client list survived. February 22nd, 2026, 4:47 a.m. local time, Jalisco, Mexico. Mexican special forces hit El Mencho's compound, 37-minute firefight. He's dead. But the raid wasn't about drugs. It was about a laptop. File, clientes, which is clients. Encrypted, triple-layered, military-grade. NSA cracked it in 11 hours. Inside, 211 names. Not drug buyers, not cartel associates. The elite clients who ordered children and organs from the supplier. 17 sitting members of Congress, 4 Hollywood A-list names you would see on your screen every week, 3 Silicon Valley founders worth over $10 billion each, 2 Wall Street hedge fund managers, 1 former NATO Secretary General, a name so big the file had a separate encryption layer just for them. The Epstein files were the blackmail network. The client list is the customer base. And it breaks down the 48-hour war for the laptop. Hour 1, CIA demanded jurisdiction, denied. Hour 6, the FBI sent a team to Mexico, turned away at the airport. Hour 14, NSA cracked the encryption. Hour 19, a Pentagon official tried to reclassify the file, overruled by executive order. Hour 31, the file reached military intelligence at Fort Bragg. Hour 48, Trump was briefed. And it goes on to say, the deep state threw everything at this laptop. They lost. Why now? Mar-a-Lago breach, same day, same hours. They didn't send a lone wolf to kill Trump. They sent a distraction so the world wouldn't notice what was on El Mencho's laptop. It didn't work. The arrests have already begun, quietly, no cameras. Pay attention to who cancels appearances this week. Pay attention to who leaves the country. Pay attention to who goes silent. The snakes can't hide anymore. This is real. The cleanup is here. Don't know if I believe that one. I do believe that one's kind of a stretch. But I mean, it's worth noting. It's worth putting in there. And lastly, one of the last outlandish theories that are kind of fun to put on here. Lastly, is that El Mencho had been dead for years, and the myth surrounding his name helps keep cartels in line. And I know you're thinking there's that one audio circulating that like, hey, wait, yo soy El Mencho and all that shit, right? He's talking. I mean, with the advances in technology, any audio containing his name or containing his voice, there's a possibility that could be AI generated. Those are just fun, outlandish theories. Moving forward. When you remove a CEO from power, there are procedures to help replace them. And this is no different. There are 4 people that can take El Mencho's place and keep the cartel alive. The question is who? As of now, Shane Baum stated that the streets are safe again, but this might have just sparked increased violence as the cartels seek revenge. A real possibility here is that the cartels regroup and come back with violence so intense that makes what happened on February 22nd seem like a small scrimmage. This could not come at a worse time because as of now, Mexico is still set to host the World Cup, which could change despite Sheinbaum claims during her daily press conferences that there are all the guarantees and zero risk for visitors attending matches. Don't know if I believe that. People might get scared. Just saying. Narco politicians are going to have to be very, very careful moving forward as their extra source of income has run out and the president has made her allegiance known. The country will more than likely see an increased violence. We might even see the arrests of narco politicians that have facilitated the growth of this and other cartels flooding the news. Retaliation is not exclusive to Mexican citizens, as American and foreigners could possibly be targets. It would be too obvious for the cartels to come after Sheinbaum directly. Instead, I do believe that they'll probably be sending her messages in the form of unnecessary murder, kidnaps, ambushing politicians, or launching a blow to the infrastructure. That's also a huge possibility. Kind of how they did back in the early 2000s. Bodies would show up in the streets with messages on sheets for rival cartels. But to me, an unrealistic expectation is to think that the cartels are just going to disband and go away. that there's going to be retaliation, unfortunately. What's the way forward for Mexico? And what do we do now, right? As I stated earlier, President Sheinbaum tried to hold off on U.S. assistance as long as she could before just the pressure just wasn't an option. Working together is a must at this point. We will see U.S.-Mexico collaboration to combating drug trafficking, maybe even some increased pressure from the U.S. to conduct raids on Mexico's territory. Where we kind of come to a halt here is trying to find a definite solution. Cartels exist because there's a demand, and that demand is in the U.S. And some Mexican politicians, I'm not going to say all, because not all Mexican politicians are corrupt. Some Mexican politicians profit from these deals by just looking the other way and or participating in some way, shape, or form. However, the private sector in the United States also profits from this conflict, whether it's American banks laundering the cartel's money, the pharmaceutical industries profiting from the opioid use, or weapons manufacturers selling their weapons and them ending up in the cartel's hands in a roundabout way. To me, there's no way that this is an opportunity for the U.S. to quietly take control of the money being laundered, the drugs being manufactured, or the humans being trafficked, because they would never do that, right? No, never. But one thing is for sure, things are going to get a whole lot weirder and a whole lot worse before they get better. I hope you had a great time listening to this. It was around 7 pages of stuff that I wrote down, and I just had to unload all the theories and all the things that I had in my head. But I do believe that it's going to be hard to find a solution for all this. But it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic shifts in the Morena party. I do think that's going to be interesting. And but you're sitting here thinking, what the fuck does this have to do with me, right? A conflict with any country can happen at any given moment. It's going to be very interesting to see how these relationships shift. And we could see another Venezuela happening in Mexico. I don't think that's going to happen because the president of Mexico kind of caved into the pressure of the U.S. government. I don't think we're going to see a removal of power. But one thing is for sure, the cartels are not going to go away because of the fact that they're so rooted into politics. And you can't really just cut the head off the snake, because it's just another head's going to come up. And that's pretty much what's going on now. Like there's 4 people that are set to take over. What they're going to do and how they're going to do it is going to be very interesting to see. I know already that there was already an ambush on on a mayor. I can't remember exactly who it was, but there was already an ambush. So I do think there's going to be a lot of messages being sent to the president in form of ambushes or something like that. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. That's pretty much it for me today. Hope it gave you a little bit of background and better understanding of what's going on, and probably what to see later on in the near future. My name is Leo with the Wet Boots Podcast, reminding you that sometimes you have no other choice than to keep going in wet boots. We'll see you next time.